Introduction. Autumn stood in her living room at 2 a.m., surrounded by towers of laundry, scattered papers, and half-finished organizing projects that had started with such promise just weeks earlier. She had tried every system Pinterest had to offer: color-coded calendars, minimalist approaches, the one-touch rule, and countless apps promising to revolutionize her life. Each attempt began with enthusiasm and ended in the same place: overwhelmed, exhausted, and convinced she was fundamentally broken. The breaking point came when her sister visited unexpectedly. As Autumn scrambled to shove clutter into closets and apologize for the mess, her sister casually mentioned how easy it was to stay organized if you just put things back where they belong. That night, alone with her shame and frustration, Autumn made a decision that would change everything. She stopped trying to organize like a neurotypical person. Instead of fighting her ADHD brain, she began working with it. She discovered that her tendency to hyperfocus could be channeled into powerful organizing sessions when timed correctly. She learned that her visual processing style meant traditional filing systems would never work, but color-coded open storage would become her superpower. Most importantly, she realized that her failures weren't character flaws, they were simply mismatched strategies. 6 months later, Autumn maintained systems that actually stuck. Her apartment became a sanctuary rather than a source of stress. Friends asked for her organizing advice, and she felt proud to show them around her space. The transformation wasn't about becoming a different person. It was about honoring how her brain actually worked and designing systems that supported her natural patterns rather than fighting against them. Your ADHD brain deserves better. This book exists because you deserve organizing systems that actually stick, instead of failing after a few weeks. For too long, the organizing industry has operated on the assumption that everyone's brain works the same way, leaving millions of adults with ADHD feeling broken, ashamed, and convinced they're destined to live in chaos forever. The truth is, your ADHD brain isn't defective, it's different. It processes information uniquely, manages time in its own way, and has specific needs that traditional organizing advice completely ignores. When you try to force neurotypical systems onto an ADHD brain, failure is inevitable. But when you align your organizing approach with how your brain actually functions, something magical happens. Systems start working, spaces become functional, and the constant battle with clutter finally ends. This book will help you stop feeling ashamed about your messy spaces and start working with your ADHD brain instead of against it. You'll discover why willpower-based organizing has never worked for you, learn the neuroscience behind sustainable systems, and develop personalized strategies that honor your unique cognitive patterns. Most importantly, you'll create calm, functional spaces without overwhelming yourself or burning out, because sustainable organization should energize you, not exhaust you. This book is for. This book is written specifically for adults with ADHD, whether you've been officially diagnosed or strongly suspect you have it, who are tired of organizing failures and ready for sustainable systems that create peace instead of stress. You might be the person who has tried every organizing system, downloaded countless apps, and started more projects than you can count, only to watch them crumble within weeks. You've probably been told you're lazy, messy, or just need more discipline, when the reality is that your brain simply processes organization differently than the neurotypical world assumes. Perhaps you're the high-achieving professional who appears to have it all together at work but comes home to chaos that fills you with shame. Or maybe you're the creative type whose brilliant ideas are buried under piles of clutter, making it impossible to focus on what truly matters to you. You might be the parent trying to model good habits for your children while secretly feeling like a fraud because you can't even find your own car keys. This book is for you if you're ready to stop apologizing for how your brain works and start celebrating its unique strengths. Replace shame-based organizing with systems rooted in self-compassion and brain science. Create spaces that support your natural patterns rather than fighting against them. Build sustainable habits that work with your ADHD, not despite it. Transform your relationship with organization from a source of stress into a tool for peace. You don't need to be ready to change everything. You just need to be open to trying something different. This book meets you exactly where you are, with all your past attempts, current frustrations, and hopes for something better. Why this book is different. Unlike traditional organizing books that rely on willpower, discipline, and one-size-fits-all solutions, this book is built on 4 revolutionary principles that make it uniquely effective for ADHD brains. Real stories, real results. Every strategy in this book has been tested by real people with ADHD in real-life situations. You'll read about Ian, who transformed his home office from a paper hurricane into a productivity sanctuary, and Autumn, who finally conquered her bedroom floor after years of closed mountain living. These aren't theoretical concepts. They're proven systems that have changed lives, and the case studies show you exactly how to adapt them to your unique situation. Brain science over willpower. Traditional organizing advice assumes you can simply decide to be organized and follow through consistently. This book recognizes that ADHD brains have different executive functioning patterns, working memory limitations, and dopamine regulation systems. Instead of fighting these differences, we leverage them. You'll learn why your brain craves visual cues, how to work with your natural energy cycles, and why certain organizing methods trigger your overwhelm response while others feel effortless. Progress over perfection. This book explicitly rejects the perfectionist organizing culture that has failed you so many times before. Instead of demanding immaculate spaces maintained through rigid routines, we focus on functional systems that accommodate real life. You'll discover the good enough principle that maintains momentum, learn to celebrate small wins that build lasting change, and develop flexibility that prevents system breakdown when life gets chaotic. Shame-busting techniques. Perhaps most importantly, this book addresses the emotional component of organizing that other resources ignore. ADHD brains are particularly susceptible to shame spirals that sabotage organizing efforts before they begin. You'll learn specific techniques to interrupt shame cycles, reframe failures as valuable data, and build self-compassion practices that sustain long-term success. This isn't another book telling you to try harder. It's a guide that finally acknowledges how your brain actually works and provides tools that honor your neurological reality. What to expect: your journey from chaos to calm. This book will take you on a carefully structured journey from understanding your ADHD brain to building sustainable systems that create lasting peace in your spaces. Each step builds on the previous one, ensuring you develop both the knowledge and practical skills needed for transformation. Understanding your ADHD brain. We begin by exploring the neuroscience behind ADHD and organization, helping you understand why traditional methods have failed and what your brain needs to succeed. You'll identify your personal ADHD patterns, recognize your unique strengths, and learn to work with your natural rhythms rather than against them. Building your foundation. Before diving into organizing techniques, we'll establish the emotional and practical groundwork for success. This includes developing shame resilience, creating supportive environments, and building the self-awareness needed to sustain long-term change. Developing sustainable systems. The heart of the book focuses on creating organizing systems that actually stick. You'll learn brain-based strategies for different areas of your life, from paper management to clothing organization to digital systems. Each system is designed to accommodate ADHD patterns while remaining flexible enough to adapt as your life changes. Maintaining and evolving. Finally, we'll address the long-term aspects of ADHD-friendly organizing, including how to recover when systems break down, adapt to life changes, and continue growing without perfectionist pressure. Throughout this journey, you'll encounter real stories from people who have walked this path before you. Autumn will show you how she conquered her kitchen chaos, using visual systems that work with her processing style. Ian will demonstrate how he built morning routines that actually stick by honoring his ADHD time blindness. These stories aren't just inspiration. They're roadmaps showing you exactly how to apply these principles in your own life. By the end of this book, you'll have not just organized spaces, but a completely transformed relationship with organization itself. You'll understand that your ADHD brain isn't a barrier to overcome. It's a unique operating system that, when properly supported, can create spaces of remarkable functionality and peace. Permission to begin again. Right now, I want you to take a deep breath and give yourself permission to let go of every organizing system that has failed you. Those Pinterest-perfect pantries, the color-coded calendars that lasted 3 days, the minimalist approaches that left you feeling empty, none of those failures were about you. They were about methods that weren't designed for your brain. Your past organizing attempts weren't mistakes, they were research. Each failure taught you something valuable about what doesn't work for your unique ADHD brain. Now it's time to use that hard-won knowledge to build something that actually fits. As you begin this journey, release yourself from the shame that has followed you through years of organizing struggles. You are not broken, lazy, or hopeless. You are a person with a beautifully complex brain that processes the world differently, and you deserve systems that honor that difference rather than fighting against it. This book isn't asking you to become someone else or to finally get it together in the way the neurotypical world demands. Instead, it's inviting you to discover the organizing approach that works specifically for your ADHD brain, one that creates calm without overwhelm, function without perfection, and sustainability without burnout. Your transformation story starts now. Not when you're ready, not when your life is less chaotic, not when you have more willpower or discipline. Right now, exactly as you are, with whatever energy you have available, in whatever space you're currently occupying, messy, overwhelming, or otherwise. Turn the page and begin the journey toward organizing systems that finally, truly, permanently work with your beautiful ADHD brain. 1. The Dopamine Detective: Why Your Brain Craves Chaos. Isaac's spotless car, chaotic office paradox. Isaac was a paradox wrapped in a 3-piece suit. As a senior marketing director, he ran quarterly campaigns worth millions, managed teams across 3 time zones, and kept his BMW spotless. Not a single receipt cluttering his dashboard, his trunk organized with labeled containers for emergency supplies, jumper cables, and seasonal gear. Yet his home office looked like a paper tornado had swept through it, leaving behind archaeological layers of projects, bills, and important documents that seemed to breed in the darkness. The fascinating contradiction of selective organization reveals how ADHD brains respond differently to various environments and pressures. Isaac's story illustrates that disorganization isn't about laziness or lack of caring. It's about how our neurological wiring responds to different contexts, stakes, and external structures. Key factors that create selective organization. External accountability creates different neural pathways than self-imposed systems. High-stakes environments, like work, trigger different dopamine responses than personal spaces. The brain's executive function operates differently under external pressure versus internal motivation. When Isaac finally understood that his car stayed organized because of external consequences, professional image, potential emergencies, resale value, while his office had no such external pressures, he stopped beating himself up about the disparity. Instead, he began working with his brain's natural response patterns rather than against them. The dopamine economics of different spaces. The ADHD brain operates on what researchers call interest-based attention, rather than importance-based attention. This means we can hyperfocus intensely on tasks that provide immediate stimulation or consequences, while struggling to maintain attention on equally important but less stimulating activities. Isaac's car represented a perfect storm of ADHD-friendly organization factors. Every time he drove, he received immediate feedback about the state of his vehicle. A messy car meant fumbling for important documents during client meetings, potential embarrassment when colleagues rode with him, and the constant low-level stress of searching for items while driving. His home office, however, existed in a consequence-free zone. Nobody saw it except Isaac. Deadlines were flexible. The mess didn't immediately impact his professional reputation or daily functioning in obvious ways. His brain, wired to respond to urgency and external stimulation, simply couldn't generate the same motivation for maintaining this private space. The neuroscience behind selective chaos. Recent research in ADHD neuroscience helps explain Isaac's experience. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like organization and planning, doesn't operate at consistent levels throughout different environments. External structure and accountability literally change how our brains function. 3 key neurological factors at play. 1. Dopamine response variability. The brain's reward system responds more strongly to immediate, tangible consequences than to abstract future benefits. 2. Executive function flexibility. Our organizational abilities fluctuate based on environmental demands and support systems. 3. Attention regulation differences. ADHD brains can achieve remarkable focus under specific conditions while struggling in environments that lack those triggers. Isaac discovered this when he started tracking his organizational success patterns. His car stayed pristine because it existed within a system of natural consequences and regular use. His office remained chaotic because it lacked these built-in accountability mechanisms. Creating artificial accountability systems. Understanding his brain's preference for external motivation, Isaac began engineering accountability into his home office organization. He didn't try to force himself to care more about the space. Instead, he created systems that mimicked the natural consequences that kept his car organized. Isaac's accountability engineering strategies. Visual transparency. He moved his desk to face the door, making the space visible to family members and guests. Regular reviews. Monthly photos sent to his accountability partner created artificial deadlines. Consequence coupling. He linked office organization to rewards he actually wanted, like his favorite coffee or weekend activities. Social integration. He scheduled regular video calls from his office, making the background his responsibility. The breakthrough came when Isaac realized he wasn't broken or inconsistent. He was responding predictably to different environmental cues. His brain worked the same way in both spaces. The spaces themselves provided different levels of structure and motivation. The permission to work with your brain. Many people with ADHD exhaust themselves trying to maintain the same level of organization across all areas of life. Isaac's story demonstrates the power of selective attention and strategic energy allocation. Rather than demanding perfection everywhere, he learned to identify which spaces truly needed consistent organization and which could function with controlled chaos. His car remained immaculate because it served as his mobile office and professional extension. His home office became functional rather than perfect, organized enough to support his work without requiring the same level of pristine maintenance as his vehicle. Building on natural patterns. The most sustainable organizational systems work with your brain's existing patterns rather than against them. Isaac's selective organization wasn't a character flaw to overcome. It was valuable information about how his attention and motivation operated. By studying where organization came naturally, he could reverse engineer those conditions for spaces that needed more structure. The external accountability that kept his car organized became a template for creating similar systems in other areas. This approach requires releasing the shame that often accompanies inconsistent organization. Isaac had spent years believing he should be able to maintain all spaces equally. The shame that surrounds organizational challenges often creates more problems than the disorganization itself, trapping us in cycles that work against our neurological wiring rather than with it. When brains meet sensory chaos. Your ADHD brain processes environmental stimuli like a smoke detector that's been set to maximum sensitivity. It picks up everything, assigns equal importance to the sound of the air conditioner and the urgent email notification, and then gets overwhelmed trying to process it all simultaneously. This isn't a character flaw. It's a neurological difference in how your prefrontal cortex manages attention and executive function. The ADHD brain's relationship with environmental stimuli creates a complex dance between seeking stimulation and becoming overwhelmed by it. Understanding this neurological reality helps explain why traditional organizing advice often fails for people with ADHD. It's designed for brains that process environments differently. Key neurological differences in ADHD sensory processing. Sensory processing differences mean ADHD brains notice more environmental details simultaneously. Executive function challenges make it harder to filter relevant from irrelevant stimuli. Dopamine regulation issues create cycles of seeking stimulation, followed by overwhelm. Olivia described her kitchen as visually screaming at her every morning. The pile of mail on the counter, the dishes in the sink, the coffee maker that needed cleaning, and the fruit bowl that needed refilling all competed for her attention simultaneously. She couldn't just ignore the mess like her neurotypical partner suggested, because her brain literally couldn't filter out those visual inputs. Once she understood this wasn't a personal failing, but a neurological difference, she began designing her environment to work with her brain's processing style rather than against it. The hypersensitive detection system. Research shows that ADHD brains have differences in sensory gating, the neurological process that helps filter background stimuli from important information. Where neurotypical brains automatically tune out repetitive or irrelevant environmental input, ADHD brains continue processing everything at full intensity. This explains why you might feel exhausted after spending time in a cluttered room, even if you weren't actively trying to organize anything. Your brain was working overtime to process every visual element, sound, and spatial relationship in that environment. Olivia discovered this when she tracked her energy levels throughout different spaces in her home. Her bedroom, with its minimal decor and neutral colors, left her feeling calm and focused. Her living room, packed with books, art supplies, family photos, and electronic devices, drained her energy within minutes. The difference wasn't about cleanliness or aesthetics, it was about cognitive load. The stimulation paradox. ADHD brains exist in a constant state of seeking optimal stimulation levels. Too little stimulation leads to understimulation, boredom, and difficulty focusing. Too much stimulation creates overwhelm, anxiety, and shutdown. This creates what researchers call the stimulation paradox. ADHD individuals often create chaotic environments to provide the stimulation their brains crave, then feel overwhelmed by the sensory chaos they've created. Frederick exemplified this pattern perfectly. His home office was filled with multiple monitors, colorful sticky notes, interesting objects, books, and project materials scattered across every surface. He needed this visual richness to feel engaged and creative, but when deadlines approached or stress increased, the same environment became overwhelming and distracting. The stimulation-seeking behaviors that create environmental chaos. Visual stimulation, leaving projects visible as reminders and motivation. Tactile stimulation, keeping interesting objects and textures within reach. Cognitive stimulation, surrounding yourself with books, articles, and learning materials. Novelty seeking, frequently rearranging spaces and trying new organizational systems. Creating sensory smart environments. The solution isn't to eliminate all stimulation. That would leave ADHD brains understimulated and unable to function effectively. Instead, the goal is creating environments with controlled, intentional stimulation that serves your brain's needs without overwhelming your processing capacity. Olivia developed what she called stimulation zones and calm zones throughout her home. Her kitchen island became a designated stimulation zone where colorful cookbooks, interesting utensils, and current projects were allowed and encouraged. Her counters became calm zones with minimal visual elements and consistent, predictable organization. This approach honored her brain's need for stimulation, while creating visual rest areas where her nervous system could recover from processing intensive environments. The neuroscience of visual processing. ADHD brains show differences in visual processing that affect how we relate to our environments. Studies using brain imaging technology reveal that people with ADHD have heightened activity in visual processing areas when exposed to cluttered environments, suggesting their brains are working harder to make sense of visual information. This neurological difference explains why "just ignore the mess" isn't viable advice for ADHD individuals. Your brain is literally incapable of filtering out visual stimuli the same way neurotypical brains do. Frederick found relief when he learned about visual processing differences. For years, he'd felt guilty about being distracted by his messy desk when trying to focus on important work. Understanding that his brain was involuntarily processing every visual element in his peripheral vision helped him stop blaming himself and start designing solutions. Environmental design strategies. Working with ADHD sensory processing requires intentional environmental design rather than traditional organizing approaches. Instead of fighting your brain's processing style, you can create spaces that provide appropriate stimulation levels for different activities and energy states. Sensory smart organizing principles. Visual weight management. Balance stimulating elements with visual rest areas. Controlled chaos zones. Designate specific areas where stimulation is welcomed. Transition spaces. Create buffer zones between high stimulation and low stimulation areas. Flexibility systems. Design environments that can be adjusted based on current stimulation needs. Olivia implemented these principles by creating what she called her energy management environment. Her morning routine happened in low stimulation spaces to prevent overwhelm when her executive function was weakest. Her creative work occurred in moderate stimulation environments that provided enough input to maintain focus. Her wind-down routine took place in minimal stimulation spaces that helped her nervous system prepare for rest. Preparing for the shame spiral. Understanding your brain's unique sensory processing needs sets the foundation for the work we'll explore in the next chapter about shame and perfectionism. Many people with ADHD develop intense shame around their environmental needs, believing they should be able to function in any space like neurotypical individuals. This shame often leads to perfectionist organizing attempts that ignore sensory processing differences, creating cycles of temporary success followed by overwhelming burnout. As we'll discover, working with your brain's sensory needs isn't accommodation, it's optimization. Your brain's beautiful mess strategy. Not all chaos is created equal, and your ADHD brain knows the difference even when you don't consciously recognize it. Functional chaos provides the stimulation and flexibility your brain craves, while dysfunctional chaos creates overwhelm and paralysis. The key is learning to distinguish between chaos that serves you and chaos that sabotages you. Understanding the difference between productive and destructive disorder helps you make peace with your brain's need for stimulation while creating systems that actually support your goals. This isn't about eliminating all messiness, it's about curating the right kind of environmental stimulation. Distinguishing functional from dysfunctional chaos. Functional chaos provides stimulation without blocking progress, visible project materials, creative supplies within reach. Dysfunctional chaos creates barriers to completing tasks, important documents buried under junk, tools scattered across multiple rooms. The same physical mess can be functional or dysfunctional, depending on whether it serves your current priorities. Tessa was an artist who felt ashamed of her creative mess until she realized it actually fueled her productivity. Her studio table covered with paint tubes, brushes, and works in progress wasn't dysfunction. It was her brain's way of keeping multiple creative threads accessible. However, the pile of unopened bills mixed in with her art supplies was dysfunctional chaos that created anxiety and prevented her from finding necessary materials. By learning to distinguish between her productive creative chaos and her problematic administrative chaos, she could maintain the stimulation her brain needed while eliminating the barriers to her success. The neuroscience of strategic disorder. Research in cognitive psychology shows that some level of environmental disorder can actually enhance creative thinking and problem solving for certain brain types. ADHD brains, with their tendency toward divergent thinking and pattern recognition.